Secretary General of Oriel in Spain, and Francisco Cervantes, Director of Distance Education of UNAM, Mexico. I'd like to invite you to please come in and have a seat. Everybody who's participating in this Congress, and I'd like to ask you to please, at the end of today's session, to please give back the simultaneous interpretation receivers to the people who are coordinating this, and then you'll pick them up again tomorrow morning. We're beginning the fourth session of this Congress, OE Campus. Oh, good afternoon. Continuing with the work for today, we have this session, which was entitled The Creation of Latin American and Caribbean Space for Higher Education, ELES, based on a proposal that the IOHE is working on through its campus program, with the idea of trying to find an academic synergy in the Americas that would lay the groundwork for creating a common ground in our region for integrating research among the universities that belong to IOHE and others on our continent to take advantage of the European higher education and the Euro-Latin American translation into CUE, or the tuning project, and the vast experience of the United States. We're here about several experiences this afternoon through our speakers, and I'd like to adjust the speakers. We were going to hear from Hélène Lamique, the honorary president of the University of Paris. She was going to chair. Well, we've asked Professor Lamique to accompany us on the front table tomorrow morning on University World Knowledge Management, and she's agreed to share her experience in that. Magna Carta, who will participate with us here. We have 20 minutes per speaker, and then we're going to have a round of questions for the participants here in the convention center and those who are following us through the channels online. So we have Bastián Baumann. He studied German law in the University of Trier, specializing in European law and the international or agency laws. He worked for the Union of European Students. He focused on the Bologna Process. He's been a member of the German Academic Exchange Service and the training program for Latin America and Europe. He has established liaisons with a number of institutions such as the European Council, the International Business Europe, ACA, and a number of others, including the European Language Council, where he was the personal counselor of the President. He is currently the Secretary General of the Magna Carta Observatory. Good afternoon to everybody. First, excuse me for my level of Spanish, but with your support, we're going to try to do this session in Spanish. Ladies and gentlemen of this marvelous audience, it's a pleasure and an honor for me to be in this conference discussing very interesting aspects and the challenging aspects of higher education. I would like to express my gratitude to the IOHE University and its rector for the kind invitation to be able to have the opportunity to talk to you. My name is Bastián Baumann. I'm the Secretary General of the Magna Carta Observatory. The Magna Carta Observatory is an international agency in Bologna, Italy. That have signed the University Magna Carta with the purpose of consolidating the principles and values, the fundamental values set forth in the Magna Carta of the universities. The mission of our observatory is to defend and support the principles, the fundamental values of universities. My intention is to talk in the structure of establishing the common ground for higher education in Europe, and it's also known as the Bologna Process. But these are different things. The Magna Carta and the Bologna Process are two different things. But also, I would like to tell you about the meaning, or perhaps the implication, of establishing a higher education area in a region such as Latin America and the Caribbean. The Magna Carta was registered originally in 1988. So, why should I talk about a document that's our universities that still are signing the University Magna Carta in growing numbers? It's still a document that is a living document. Its contents are lasting in relation to our universities. The statements that about what a university is and has been for years have not changed, and the importance has not been reduced. Universities that have signed the Magna Carta Universitatum state that they belong to the academic community with a shared purpose, with the fundamental principles and values with which this reinforces the idea of the individual university and the academic community as a whole. The essential importance of reinforcing the community. There have been attacks against the institutional autonomy and freedom of instruction. Very regularly, these attacks are sometimes obvious, sometimes subtle. On some occasions, they are more or less severe with the individuals involved. In the least severe cases, the people are restricted, are deprived of the personal rights. In the most extreme cases, they are physically or psychologically harmed and even sometimes murdered. But systemically, the attacks endanger the fundamental idea of universities. This may be intentionally or not. The principles and values of the university are also constantly jeopardized by progressive processes of reform and discourses that arise regarding higher education. Why? Because these are the principles and values. Why are they so important? Principles and values, they are part of the backbone of the idea of the university. Without them, the institution of the university would have a totally different nature and purpose. However, the nature and purpose of the university, the way we know, is not just a requirement. It's something indispensable. It's an element that establishes relationships among countries, within countries, and between different countries and political and economic systems. It goes beyond artificial boundaries and actual boundaries that we're accustomed to using and that we forcibly have to live with. Accordingly, it is worthwhile to look at the history of the University Magna Carta. The idea of drafting a document of this nature began in 1986-87. Certain developments came up in Western Europe. The common programs for mobility of students were discussed, but also during the 1980s, greater changes happened in the area of governance of universities. The government withdrew its direct influence according to the movement of no longer intervening but facilitating, enabling. The academic circles welcomed these developments but felt the need to reduce a certain degree of risk for universities in the sense that higher education policy should not be set by other people outside of the universities. At the same time, it's been possible to observe some changes in Eastern Europe, but nobody knew when these changes finally would happen, or even if they would ever happen at all. Nevertheless, universities in Eastern Europe were, for example, members of the European University Association had the clear need to support the academic setting in Eastern Europe, which had to face a very difficult situation. On the one hand, doing research on an academic basis and to convey this knowledge, and on the other hand, to work as an institution of the government, contributing to government and to state doctrine. In 1988, people responsible for the University Magna Carta were able to gather rectors of East and West and sign a common document referring exclusively to academic traditions and summarizing academic values and principles of the university. In summary, these are four principles. These principles are: university is an autonomous institution and should be independent of all political authority and economic power. Education, teaching, and research are inseparable. Freedom of instruction is the heart of the university's life. Following with the humanistic tradition makes the university make an effort to attain universal knowledge. And at this time, the rumor that universities got together to sign the document quickly has spread around the world. Therefore, universities, not just European universities signed the Magna Carta, but many outside of Europe. Despite the fact of some Eurocentrism in the document, which you can see in this document. This is due only to the historical context when it was written. This is also what many universities outside of Europe have signed the document. This is also a clear sign that the values and principles are not by nature European, because they are values and principles that are global to all academic circles. Using the anniversary of 900 years of the University of Bologna in Italy as an external stimulus, the Magna Carta of the universities became the first declaration written in the history of higher education containing the freedoms and proclaiming the fundamental principles of universities at a global level. There are differences among universities, and there's no need to have a single uniform university. Diversity enriches, and is a benefit. But it must never be a diversity in values. Values and principles must be the same the world over. This also has been the reason that the preamble of the Bologna Declaration, the overall document for establishing the European common ground for higher education, this area must be constructed on the values contained in the University Magna Carta. It would be a serious mistake to see a process of regionalization in higher education, to see it as simply technocratic, or in other words, to only address structural problems of development. Governments constantly must remember the specific role played by universities in our societies. But we also must remember this in the academic community. Reforms entail a potential danger of strongly emphasizing the grains, forgetting about the implications of the whole university. The University Magna Carta has been an initiative by universities. When the Bologna Declaration was signed 11 years later, this was an initiative by the governments, perhaps the response, but it was an initiative by governments. But they still referred to the true starting point of European integration of higher education and recognized the importance of academic values and principles, referring to the Magna Carta in their document. In the Lima Declaration this year, the Lima Declaration, I am happy to read that the importance of institutional autonomy has been one of the goals. Nevertheless, I wasn't able to see any reference to the importance of a good idea, appropriate, and necessary for the process of establishing an common ground for higher education in Latin America and the Caribbean, for the values and principles, academic values, to play a major role. The University Magna Carta is a global document of academic circles which you can use as a referent in the Latin American and Caribbean context. The Observatory of the Magna Carta offers any kind of advice or assistance that you feel may be necessary. We discuss at this time in the Observatory we're discussing the possibility of establishing a regional chapter of the Observatory for Latin America. In order to be able to bear in mind working much more closely with our universities that have signed the agreement and the reforms that happen in the region. Obviously, this might help or could provide some sort of support for your activities. I support the idea of establishing an area in Latin America and the Caribbean for higher education. I feel that this would be the right answer to global development. This region must find an answer of its own, bearing in mind the needs and specific missions for this region. Regardless of the pathway that you decide to travel, it must be constructed under the understanding, a collective understanding of what higher education is and why it is there. Constantly, we must remind ourselves, establishing universities is one of the most significant achievements in intellectual and social history of all humankind. Universities have been and will continue to be the um, melting pot for all kinds of ideas and notions for scientific, economic, social, and cultural and technical ideas, the centers for critical thought, and the vanguard of innovation. Modern development without universities is inconceivable. That is, autonomous universities. The exercise of a critical spirit is essential and can be achieved only within a context of research and ongoing science to carry it out autonomously. The university and academic life are a mixture of tradition and innovation. Rituals are often formal, but the lifestyle, must make informality possible and leave room for eccentricity, which is crucial for creativity. Freedom of instruction is a crucial element for this. Freedom of instruction is a very special form of freedom of speech. And freedom of speech is fundamental for a functioning society. I need only 2 more minutes. Freedom of expression, freedom of speech is fundamental for a functioning society. If established society, economy, politics, culture cannot be challenged, it cannot evolve. Nevertheless, this freedom must be exercised with care. The university must remain like an extraordinary institution, respecting pluralism, valuing variety and flexibility of approaches to the different problems involving instruction and research to benefit societies and individuals. The University Magna Carta is not just a formal document. It provides the groundwork for how to be the member of a worldwide community of universities sharing the same ideals and ideas, although on occasions so I would be very pleased if you would like to decide how to have to appropriately take into account values in your additional discussions to establish the common area for higher education in Latin America and the Caribbean. Here in Latin America, universities are the driving forces, the engine of the regionalization process. This is a major difference compared to Europe, where it's not just the universities, but also that the role of the government is also very important. But I think that this is a major advantage that you have here. It is in the best interest of the universities to conserve the values and principles of universities in the process of establishing a common area here in the region. And you should be able to take advantage of this situation and this advantageous opportunity with which I feel that I'm finishing now. I would like to wish you the best of success, and thank you very much for listening to me.